Unless you've been living under a rock recently, you would have seen something in the news about Great Northern and it going woke.
The hashtag Go Woke, Go Broke began
for national parks. I've spent the last week or so watching this on social media, looking at the mainstream media coverage of this and the narrative around it, and I have a different take on it. You see, I think Great Northern may have actually done us a favour here. Maybe, just maybe, Great Northern have inadvertently kicked one of the best own goals we could have seen out of this whole situation. This video, I want to talk about what they did, why they did it, and why the government in Victoria is trying to change some of our state forests to national parks, and just explain why I think Great Northern may actually be one of the best things that have happened to this cause yet. Northern recently launched its Outdoors for a Cause campaign. It was aimed at buying new land to add to national parks. But because it had national parks in its title there, I think everybody jumped on the bandwagon of what the Victorian government especially is trying to do with our state forests and national parks. And I think some of us got a little bit confused. You see, because here in the People's Republic of Victoria, our state government, they're trying to change. There's a few different state forests that they're trying to change into national parks. And when Great Northern said that they were doing something to support national parks, people were, well, they were outraged by it. If you feel passionate enough about trying to keep the parks and the forests the way that they are right now, there's a petition down below that is running out, I think, on the 8th of February. So make sure you get over there and sign it if you want to keep them the way they are right now. If these changes were to come into play, and some of the state forests are turned into national parks, there's quite a few activities that you and I do that will be impacted by this. Things like four-wheel driving, free camping, dogs, prospecting, hunting, timber harvesting. Mind you, I think timber harvesting's banned in Victoria anyway, so I'm not sure how they're making that to be an argument. All of these things could easily have their own dedicated video about what you can do in a state park versus in a state forest versus a national park. But this video would go on forever and ever and ever. But if you've camped in a national park, you know that you can only camp in designated areas, so you're going to be with other people there. It's pretty hard to find your own little place. I've experienced this, you've probably experienced it too. But in a state forest, well, I can go and camp right there if I want to. It's no big deal. But one of the biggest problems I see with national parks is that the amount of locked gates that I see in national parks versus state forest is, it's out there. There's a lot more locked gates. It just seems to be, this is a national park now, we're just going to lock it down so you can't get in. And that is what has people upset. Now, Great Northern weren't actually supporting this move. It was just interpreted that way because everyone's a little bit on edge about what this state government's trying to do. What Great Northern were looking to do was buy more land to give to national parks for endangered species and plants and so forth. It didn't have anything to do with converting state parks to national parks. But because it's such a hot topic at the moment for anyone who goes out into the state forests and national parks, it's a hot topic for them, and it seems that we're not getting anyone listening to us about this. So when Great Northern did this, people were, well, they copped the brunt of it. So why is it that these days companies seem to want to involve themselves in this sort of thing? What is it that makes these big companies think that we're going to do a certain political track here on this particular subject? Because I can't think of one single situation where a company has done this and it's been successful. Not one. If you can think of one, put it in the comments, because honestly, I can't think of one. Let's take Qantas, for example, our national airline carrier. During the Voice referendum, they were heavily behind the Yes campaign. Heavily. I'm not going to go into all their outstanding COVID tickets and all this sort of business that the government still owes them, because I'm sure they had a part in it, but they took an active role in the Yes campaign. That's a publicly listed company. They spent $400,000 on a political sort of advertising thing for the government. And if I was a shareholder in that company, I'd certainly be upset by that. It was a move that absolutely contributed to Qantas being knocked off the top rung of Australia's most trusted transportation carrier. They're no longer the most trusted in the country. That's Virgin now, I think it is. So it hurt them. And if you've flown with Qantas in the last, say, 12 to 18 months, without a delay, without a cancellation, without a bag being lost, you've done pretty well. I think their focus moved away from their core business and onto something that just wasn't. And think about Bud Light over in the States. Bud Light is the go-to beer, and we're getting to beer, the go-to beer in America for all the flyover states, all the conservative sort of population of the States. You think about who their customer base is, generally young males, conservative young males. They are generally that. So when they came out and put a transgender influencer on a can and said, "This is it, look at this, how good it is," you lost your customer base. They did not take to that well at all. There were massive calls all over the States to ban this beer, to boycott the beer. And in 12 months, they lost in sales up to $1.4 billion, with a B, billion dollars in sales because of that move. Then comes along Great Northern, says to Bud Light, "Hey, hold my beer. I'm going to see if I can do better." They came out with their campaign to raise $200,000 to buy more land for national parks. And on the face of it, if all this other crap wasn't going on with state forests and national parks, they probably would have been received easier or better. But because all this other stuff's going on, it wasn't received well. There was outcry about this all over social media, people pouring their beers out, people stabbing it with knives, all sorts of things, running over it with their four-wheel drives, all sorts of things were being done. And very, very quickly, Great Northern reversed it, or they paused their campaign. And I think they're doing something different now, just with like endangered species or something like that, but they've gone away from buying more land. When you look at these companies doing this, you look at the demographics that their customers are. For Qantas, it's everybody. For Bud Light, it was what I said, those young male conservative drinkers over the flyover states in America. And for Great Northern, you don't need to spend too long on their social media to work out that they're outdoor enthusiasts, four-wheel drivers, campers. Come on. What are you doing? I want to talk about these things. A lot of the commentary that I'm seeing about what they did, one, they've gone woke. So I'm going to answer that. Did they go woke? Two, is it actually a really sensational own goal that they've kicked here without actually knowing it? And three, what the main threat, I think, to our state forests national park really is. Was it woke? I think woke is a term that's being used all sorts of different ways these days. What Qantas did by supporting that very divisive campaign was absolutely 100% woke, 100%. Bud Light did by bringing in a transgender activist, influencer, whatever you want to call it, into a brand that clearly was not for that. Again, that was 100% woke. What Great Northern did was something, I don't think it was woke at all. I just think that the marketing people at Great Northern need their freaking heads read, because you really didn't read the room. You missed your demographic by a long way, a long, long way. I don't think it was woke. I think they were trying to support what they thought was right, but it's just missed the mark because of all the other stuff that's going on. Victoria could almost be seen as the nation's capital for protesting. It seems like there is protesting in this state every week. The war in the Middle East saw protests happening in our state's capital every single Sunday afternoon. They would be protesting that Gaza-Palestine situation every single week. There's even a ceasefire right now, and they're still protesting every week for a conflict that's happening 14,000 kilometres away. And you think that the little People's Republic of Victoria is going to make any difference of what's happening over there, but they still do it. Victoria has become almost numb to protesting. Running protests in a state like Victoria is almost a non-starter. No, all you're doing is pissing people off. I'll bring your attention to something here. Right here is the Murray River. Farmers all up and down this Murray River all protested. Now, to get a farmer off his farm and go somewhere to actually protest is a pretty big deal. Like, these guys are busy all the freaking time. Trying to pull a farmer off his farm to go and do something that's not going to help him make money on his farm is just, it's an impossible task. But I know a couple of times the farmers along this great big river have come together and protested about what's happening with this water. They've gone to different places along the Murray to protest. A big convoy went up to Parliament House in Canberra because this is controlled by the state governments and by the federal government. They went up there to protest, and it made the news. Nothing has changed. In fact, it's probably worse than what it was before. I may sound cynical about this, but this water here, this flows down to the lakes at the entrance down near Adelaide. There are a lot more votes in Adelaide, and it's a lot more competitive on the political spectrum than what it is here along the Murray. So they're going to appease the people where the votes are, and that is what matters a lot in these sorts of complex situations. If you live in a regional community, you will absolutely relate to what I'm about to say. There are small amounts of people in your hometown and in your district. There's a lot more people in the capital cities. And as far as the governments are concerned, you are one vote. And if there's not many of you here, they don't give a shit. They really don't care. They want the votes. Politicians want two things: money in their pocket and to have another term in power. And that's it. There's nothing else that they care about. Whilst I think it is absolutely admirable for the people who are trying to save our state forests to get a convoy together to go to Woodend. On the videos that I've seen, you probably had 1,000 to 2,000 people there. I think that's fantastic. I think getting anyone off their couch and getting there to voice their opinion on a social cause, I think is top notch, and I take my hat off to you. You've done bloody well. The downside of that, the news cycle is 24 hours and no one gives a shit anymore. I'm sorry, that's just life. What Great Northern did was something that I certainly didn't expect it to happen, and I think you need to think about it this way. When we have a protest or somebody protests, it's going to be on the news in that state once, maybe twice, once in the evening, once in the morning. That's it. What Great Northern has done is brought this whole thing to a national conversation. I've seen it discussed on different news outlets, national news outlets. I saw it on the Today Show. In fact, that was crazy. It was this woman who went on the Today Show on the weekend and said, oh, they're just all bogans protesting this. They're just bogans. They're trying to make it a political thing, blah, 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 blah. And when you deep dive into what this person actually does, she has been the campaign manager for the Labor Party for like 20-something elections. It's not like you're not influenced by government there. It's just nuts. What these people are doing is nuts. But I think Great Northern can't help with this. I think if someone in this community that has time, some of the bigger creators or someone who fits it well, you should be contacting Great Northern, in my opinion. Get onto Great Northern and collaborate on this. They are on our side, I believe. Their marketing department just sucks. They didn't read the room. But I think if anyone is going to come to the cause for what we are fighting for in state forests and national parks, I think if you collaborated with Great Northern on that, I don't know, there could be something there. I think it's worth exploring. Let me know what you think. There is something that all of us can be doing to help this cause. All of us. And we all see it after a long weekend here in Australia. And that is the amount of bloody rubbish that people leave out here. It doesn't... I guarantee you, when park rangers drive through and they see rubbish, they pick it up, they throw it in their back of their ute, because they do it, and you do it, I do it. When I go to a campsite and there's rubbish, I pick it up and I take it out with me. But after every long weekend, there is that much freaking rubbish around. Anyone who is not in the camping sort of community would look at this and go, all of you campers are friggin' pigs, you're ruining the bush. And I can't blame them, because, like, look at this. This happens every freaking long weekend, every school holidays, all that sort of stuff. And I think it's from people coming from the cities, like generally speaking, people coming from the cities, driving a long way to get to a campsite, going up and camping, having a heap of rubbish, and then going, shit, I've got to transport all this stuff back home now in my car for the next 3 or 4 hours. And they don't want to do that, and they leave it there. Simple as that. They're just pigs. Where I am right here, this is Nursery Bend on the Gunbow, in the Gunbow. And where are we now? We are in National Park right now. See, here, you start in a national park, you drive through a state forest, then you're back into National Park again. And I've got to be honest, the bush is exactly the same all the way through it. There's nothing... You do get a bit of national park closures through the middle there, through the winter, but generally speaking, the bush is the same the whole way through. That's not the same in all the parks and all the, like up in the high country, for example, it's not the same. But here, this is probably one of the most popular camp spots along this river in our section of the river. See how much rubbish is here? There's nothing. That's not to say it never happens, but there's nothing here. And there's a reason for that. It's because at the entrances to this campgrounds, and there's campgrounds all the way along here. Easter long weekend, this place is packed. Any long weekend, this place is packed. But when you leave here, before you get out into the main road again, there's all these big dump bins, skip bins, that people put their rubbish in. And there's more rubbish there than what can actually fit in the bin. People put it there, but it's all centrally located and it's easy to clean up. I don't know who actually does it, whether it's the government that does it, local council, or even some local community members. I'm not sure. But when I go elsewhere to other national parks, there's nothing there. Like, I think if people put rubbish bins at central locations, people are going to be more inclined to bring their rubbish out and put it away. The other thing that I think hurts us is the amount of tracks that we make for ourselves. Now, in some places you're allowed to do it, no problem with that. I've been in plenty of national parks, and this is going to happen regardless of if you're in a state forest or a national park. The same people are going to do it regardless of where it is. And what I'm talking about is getting off track and making up your own tracks into the hills, into the bush, making big, muddy friggin', you know what I'm talking about. People enjoy driving that. I personally don't. I could just leave that be. But I get that people enjoy that. You watch on some videos up to the Cape and stuff when people are going through some horrendous bog holes and stuff, and you go, there's a track that goes around that bog hole. You're making that worse. Why not just drive around and keep going? But that's just me. But these people are doing it. Whether they're allowed to do it or not, it depends on where they are. But I have a question. If you see this sort of thing happening when you're out and about, you see people about to leave their campsite, the fire might still have smoke coming out of it, there's rubbish left there, or so you see someone cutting a new track through a national park, what do you do about it? I think through that whole COVID period, people were encouraged to dob on each other, and I'm not a fan of that. I think that kind of sucks. But what would you do about that? You see somebody about to piss off from camp, obviously packed up and left a heap of rubbish there. What would you do? What would you do? I know what I would do. Personally, I'd just go in there and pick up the freaking rubbish and take it out for them. But what would you do to get them to stop doing this? Anyway, let me know your thoughts about the Great Northern thing. I think that if the right person is there to leverage this, it could certainly be used to help us out. But it's going to take that right person. Anyway, catch you later.